Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the third session of the Western Cover Crops Council Intermountain Regional Subconference. I'd like to welcome everybody back. And our first presentation today, Carbon Markets and Policy Tools, is going to be presented by Colin Mitchel, who is with he's a Sustainable Ag Specialist with NCAT in San Antonio, Texas. At NCAT, Colin provides free technical assistance to farmers and ranchers through the ATRA program and works on projects related to soil health, ecosystem services, cover crops, agroforestry, regenerative ag, and more. Welcome, Colin.
Hey, thank you, Stephen, and thank you for the introduction. And thank you to Lauren, Jason, Western SARE, Idaho Extension, Oregon State Extension, and everyone else attending and for having me. I wish I could be there with y'all in person, but this will have to do for now, and I'm happy to be here. As Stephen said, my name is Colin Mitchel, and I'm a Sustainable Ag Specialist at the National Center for Appropriate Technology, or NCAT, because that's quite a mouthful. And we're going to be discussing a pretty hot topic in climate mitigation and potential sources of additional farm income to pay y'all for that cover crop and use and soil health improvement. And we're going to be looking at carbon markets and other policy tools that pay you farmers for those environmental improvements. Before we start, I just wanted to let y'all know a little bit more about our organization, NCAT. Again, I work out of the Southwest office in San Antonio. We cover Texas and the Four Corner regions, and NCAT is a nationwide nonprofit organization established in 1976 that has 5 regional offices across the country: Arkansas, Mississippi, California, New Hampshire, and Texas, with our headquarters in Butte, Montana. We also have some staff in other states such as Pennsylvania, Virginia, and Colorado. And we work on issues pertaining to sustainable agriculture, sustainable energy, and sustainable communities. ATRA is the program you mentioned earlier, another long kind of mouthful. It's appropriate technology transfer to rural areas, so let's stick with ATRA. And that's our sustainable agriculture program and one of our flagship programs. And it's part of a cooperative agreement with the USDA Rural Development. And we offer a wide range of services through this program to sustainable ag producers and even non-sustainable ag producers. And we have tons of publications. We have a toll-free helpline. We have webinars, podcasts, a YouTube channel. Please go check it out for yourself on our website. So I do want to start with kind of just the basics of what ecosystem services are, because this is what carbon markets and other kind of policies and payment programs will pay farmers for, is improving these ecosystem services. And ecosystem services are ecological characteristics, functions, or processes that directly or indirectly contribute to human well-being. And ecosystem services are benefits that society derives from these functioning ecosystems. And all of society relies on these ecosystem processes operating the way they're supposed to. And this is true of sustainable agriculture production as well. Sustainable agriculture relies on vital ecological interactions. And this slide shows examples of several types of ecosystem services. And when you read through them, it's apparent that these different services directly or indirectly contribute to our personal and community well-being. And you can see some of these are pollination, water quality, water quantity, carbon sequestration, which is going to be a big topic today, is part of this. And farmers can contribute to this not just with providing food and fiber, but by incorporating things such as cover crops, minimum or no-till, and forest buffers, rotational grazing and things like that. So let's get into the type of payment programs that can exist for you producers that are, taking on cover crops of minimum and no-till. First off is going to be a direct or cost share. And this is really a government organization or another nonprofit or a city government paying you, the farmer, either in full or partly, for adopting a practice, basically. And these are going to, do things that are going to protect water quality, quantity, improve wildlife habitat, and sequester carbon. Next is tax incentives, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one, just a little blurb about it. And this is basically going to be giving you a tax break. Think about conservation easements. This would fit under tax incentives. And you get a tax break for conserving land, improving these ecosystem services. Here in Texas, we give tax breaks for just ag producers in general. So because you're providing a ecosystem service of feeding us. And the only thing I would recommend on that one, if you do pursue an easement and you still want to farm and don't want to take off parts of your farm out of production, there are working land easements out there, so check out those. Next is certification programs. This is one I'm sure you all are familiar with. Organic, real organic, regenerative organic. There's a million of them now. These are essentially paying you, the farmer. Basically, you, the farmer, are going to get paid more for your product, and you get to charge a higher price point because you're providing an improvement to the environment through your organic program or whatever. And next is ecosystem service markets. And this one is more unique, and it basically creates a free market-based strategy where the value of these improved ecosystem services is bought and sold through a credit creation program. And we are going to spend most of our time on that one today. But first, I do want to spend a little more time on direct payments. This will kind of come up later, and we'll talk about some hybrid programs. With direct payment programs, it involves some version or scenario where the buyer is paying a farmer and ranchers directly for implementing some sort of management practice. And that practice specifics are laid out to describe best management practice that are designed to meet specific environmental protections. In the direct payment programs, you typically have to sign a contract saying that you will adhere to the best management practices and scope and location of work. And in most cases, the environmental improvement will not be measured, which is different than the ecosystem service markets, carbon markets, water quality markets. So this is why a contract is used to ensure these environmental improvements. One of the most notable direct payment programs are cost share programs from USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, or NRCS. And I always like to make sure I emphasize these NRCS programs. There's two main types, EQIP, or the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. And this program provides financial and technical assistance to producers to address natural resource concerns, deliver environmental benefits such as improved water and air quality, conserved ground and surface water, increasing your soil health, reducing soil erosion, sedimentation. So cover crops check off a lot of those boxes. And there is a EQIP conservation practice standard for cover crops as well. And the conservation stewardship is the other one, and it helps farmers and ranchers build on existing conservation efforts while strengthening their operations. I typically think of EQIP as new practice, CSP as you're continuing practice. And both programs typically feature shorter contracts, typically less than 5 years, and rely on, like I said, those practice standards. Every state has them. If you're interested in getting involved in changing or developing those, there are technical committees you can hop on. I'm on the Urban Ag one here in Texas. It does take a long time to get those changed and amended, though. I did want to just emphasize a different type of direct payment program. None of us are New Yorkers here, but I think it's a good example of kind of what can happen with that urban-rural interface. The New York City Watershed Agriculture Program was created by the New York City Environmental Protection Department. New York City obtains about 90% of its drinking water from reservoirs in the Catskill-Delaware watershed, located more than 100 miles north from the city. The remainder of the water comes from the Croton watershed, which you can see down there at the bottom. Together, these watersheds cover about 2,000 square miles. And in 1992, the New York City Department of Environmental Protection, they managed the city's water supply, developed a partnership with the farming communities in these watersheds. Basically, they were going to have to build this really expensive water treatment plant. And instead of doing that, they decided to pay these farmers and ranchers to implement best management practices that create better water quality. They paid 100% of the cost to create and implement these practices in the Catskill-Delaware watershed, did a cost share for a lot of them in the Croton watershed. And as of that's 2 years ago now, 2019, there was 90% farmer participation. They developed 400 whole farm plans, and there was 5,000 best management practices, though in some cases they have started buying up easements, especially in riparian areas. Now to move on to ecosystem service markets, which is, that big kind of hot topic that's around now. And these are unique because they use free market tools to create a marketplace where ecosystem service credits can be bought or sold. And this area is getting tons of attention right now. These are unique in that, again, credits are created, valued, and exchanged. You have a buyer, a seller. There's going to be a coordinating organization that kind of manages everything. You will have to define and evaluate detrimental and beneficial environmental impacts. There's going to be assessment criteria and verification processes, typically by third parties, ideally by third parties. and there's going to be a process for determining the value of these credits. So we're going to start with carbon markets. We'll briefly talk about water quality trading markets and then comprehensive markets. And then I'm going to go through some emerging markets and some different soil health policies. And there's some combination of all these different programs out there. So with the climate crisis at hand, carbon markets have been receiving lots of attention. I've been working on carbon markets and educating farmers and ranchers on carbon markets kind of since I started with NCAT about 3 years ago. And I feel like every couple of months I see a new one pop up or is getting developed. And the idea behind this is that farmers like yourselves, and specifically y'all with cover crops and no and minimum till, can help mitigate climate change by sequestering carbon. There are types of buyers when it carbon markets and different types of programs. The first one is cap and trade. Basically, the government comes in and put a cap on carbon emissions, like oil producers, airline companies. That company have internal markets or internal sustainability goals that they want to meet, and so they will voluntarily sign up. Farmers can voluntarily trade markets and voluntary markets if they want to offset their carbon. Carbon markets, you have California and regional greenhouse gas emission trade markets that exist. Thank you for letting me know. I'm sorry about that, y'all. Okay, so back to sources of ways you guys can sequester carbon and farmers can sequester carbon. The main ways that carbon markets are paying out right now: trees, basically afforestation, not destroying treat areas, or if you're going to plant trees as well, or riparian buffers, things like that. Another one is going to be soils, and this is going to be the way y'all with your cover crops, minimum no-till, and improving that soil health is going to be the main way to sequester carbon for row crop farmers. There also is some other programs for methane reduction in rice, and this typically has to do with the timing of the flooding of your fields. Right now, these haven't shown a lot of promise. Microsoft bought some credits for some Arkansas rice farmers, and they got about enough to buy a cup of coffee. So this isn't a main one right now. So I do want to talk about some issues. These carbon market issues, a lot of times I see them in different articles of this glowing thing that's going to solve climate change and make all our farmers rich. But they're a lot more nuanced than that. And there's a lot of issues I think that should be discussed. One of them is known as permanence. So with permanence, it is a requirement that all the carbon sequestered, whether it's in your trees or soils, has to be permanent. And this isn't reflected in a lot of the contracts that are created with landowners participating in these markets. Almost all of these contracts are over 10 years. And with the forest ones, some of them get up to 50 years and over. And permanence creates a problem for those leasing properties and for those that may not pass down their land. It also, permanence is an issue because of occurrences of fires and floods that may destroy carbon stocks in soils and trees, which will increase with global warming. It's also important to understand your liability if these things are destroyed. Do you have to pay everything back if fire rips through your property and then you get a flash flood, washing a lot of your soil away that you've built up over the past, 6-7 years of being really on the ball with your cover crop practice and your minimum no-till? Another issue is going to be additionality. And this means that the carbon must be new. And farmers and ranchers, or farmers like yourselves that have been already sequestering carbon and building up your soil health, you won't be eligible for payments. So any of the work you've done in the past, you will not get paid for that carbon that you already sequestered. I know a rancher here in Texas took his soil organic matter from 2% to 6% over about 10 years. He will not get paid for any of that if he signed up for a carbon market. And this also means additionality that you can't be involved in multiple carbon markets at the same time. Typically, a lot of them make you sign a non-compete clause. Another issue is going to be around measurement uncertainty. And depending on what time of year, you can take soil samples, the bulk density, the organic matter, which are two of the major measurement standards, may be different. Summertime versus wintertime will look a lot different. There's also an issue with testing depth. Are soil samples being taken at 6 inches, 12 inches, or soil samples being taken to a few feet as a soil core? Often, carbon is sequestered in deeper soil profiles. Increasingly, remote sensing and models are being used to generate values of carbon sequestration on farms, and models such as Comet Farm from NRCS would only provide estimates that likely won't be accurate enough for a carbon market. Remote sensing is using biometrics taken from satellites that are often ground truth with soil samples and other measurements, And remote sensing has issues with modeling errors and can rely on extrapolating assumptions from a smaller area to larger swaths of land to calculate whole farm carbon sequestration that could also lead to inaccuracies. Geography is also an issue. On farm and nationally, a slope will have different carbon sequestration potential than a flat in a valley, and even different pastures or fields will have different levels of sequestered carbon. I think there's also something to be said for comparing carbon sequestration potential between, y'all in the Intermountain West, the arid parts of the West, versus folks in maybe the coastal Oregon, Washington area or the Northeast. It does take much longer to sequester carbon in drier areas, especially if you're doing dryland farming, than in, wetter, more temperate, less volatile areas of the country. I know the Intermountain West can get pretty dry. Y'all rely on snow quite a bit, and I've been up there in the summer times and seen how arid it can be, similar to here in Texas. Another issue is going to be environmental justice, and this has to do with those offset markets. So, is a company just paying farmers in rural areas to improve land, but they're going to pollute a city or a low-income neighborhood and cause a lot of destruction and pollution somewhere else? And lastly is greenwashing. And this is essentially companies putting a spin on these agriculture-based carbon markets, and they're slapping their brand on the initiative, calling it a day, not really getting the job done, and patting themselves on the back. That is, basically falling into a marketing trap with some of these carbon markets. So water quality trading, just real quick, is going to be similar to carbon markets, but they are cap and trade markets, and there are voluntary ones. With capped markets, the authority typically comes from the Clean Water Act or your state governments, and they put a limit on temperature, sediment, or pollutants like nitrogen and phosphate in larger bodies of water like rivers and lakes. And this pollution cap is often referred to as a total maximum daily load, or TMDL. And it comes in two forms: point source pollution, which is like from a pipe or a ditch, and non-point source pollution. So that's like fertilizer running off your farm and into a stream. Point source polluters could be a large corporation or even like a port authority. And two examples of this are going to be like the Chesapeake Bay Water Quality Trading Program. And there was one in Ohio called the Great Miami River Watershed Water Quality Trading Program. The idea behind this is basically that it's a lot cheaper to pay farmers and ranchers to change their practices to reduce nutrient loads on bodies of water than to build these super expensive filtration plants. In the case of the Chesapeake Bay, farmers and ranchers in Maryland and Virginia, two of the largest polluting states, were able to receive technical assistance and peer-to-peer learning opportunities through private funding from folks like Lockheed Martin in Port of Virginia. And these farmers actually had TMDL limits themselves, but were allowed to sell extra credits they generated. And I do want to point out that y'all in Idaho have a bill coming up this session that would allow your Department of Environmental Quality to create a voluntary water quality trading markets. And if anyone's from Oregon, y'all have water quality trading markets up there as well. So these bundled and stacked markets are really kind of a combination between, conserving wildlife, water quality and quantity, and carbon. And you're able to get multiple payments from multiple ecosystem services. And this is really a bigger reflection of the work you would be doing in a regenerative agriculture setting, or if you're planting cover crops and reducing tillage. You're not just sequestering carbon, you're likely doing multiple of these things. And it is a more holistic approach and can likely get more smaller farmer involvement. And now we're going to move on to talking about some of these emerging markets. We're going to cover three, and those are the kind of the big three that you see around quite a bit. There are other ones in development, but we're going to focus on these. And the first one is the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium. This one is a nonprofit. They are focused on carbon initially, but are looking to add water quality trading, water quantity, and some wildlife protection credits as well. As you can see from the map, they are doing multiple pilot projects all over the country, including one in Oregon. That one is focused on grazing right now. If you're interested in what they're doing, it's worth giving them a call. I know they're going to be expanding and doing lots more pilot projects, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do one focused on row crops in y'all's area. Right now, they're doing all these pilots because they're trying to have site-specific verification and evaluation protocols, because soils in the Northwest are different than the Great Plains, and so are conditions and things like that. There are a lot of major players involved with this one, like McDonald's, Cargill, Nature Conservancy, National Fish and Wildlife, and tons of trade associations. There's like 40 people on their website that are involved with this. They're not going to start selling credits until 2022. It was originally 2020. I've seen them push it back slowly, but I think it's largely because they are doing all these trials. In my conversations with folks that work there, they're trying to dial on the science to create a measurement and verification protocol and tools that are site-specific, cost-effective, and accurate using soil testing and geospatial information from satellite. Yeah, they're doing lots of R&D on this one. So next is Indigo Ag, and this one may pique y'all's interest. It is only for crop producers. You can get paid for adding cover crops, either for the first time, extending your duration, or diversifying your mix, diversifying your crop rotation, or reducing or eliminating tillage, or reducing fertilizer by reducing your nitrogen inputs or switching to injection. Indigo collects data directly from growers and the equipment that they use to model the carbon levels within their soil. Indigo gathers as much data as they can through like kind of scalable passive methods, such as that satellite imagery to see what your covers look like at different parts of the year, and to assess how farm management practices have changed over time. Indigo's soil sample is a representative subset of fields to ensure the accuracy of their carbon quantification. The minimum for Indigo, last time I heard, was 300 acres. So this is actually the lowest you'll see in what we're talking about. The Ecosystem Service Market Consortium doesn't have a lower limit yet. Farmers are required to submit 3 to 5 years of historical as well as current season details about planting and harvest dates, fertilizer types, amounts, application dates, tillage types, and dates, and also information on cover crop types, dates, planting, termination methods, and organic amendments if you applied them. You will get paid according to how much carbon you have in your soil. In 2020, they were guaranteeing $10 per credit, per ton, and more if it goes up. Since 2020 is now over, I'm not sure if that $10 minimum is still holding. I haven't caught any of the webinars they do pretty regularly in the new year. It does take about 12 months to be issued a credit from sign up. Indigo also is providing agronomic support. They will try to sell you some microbial seed treatments. They're a big agribusiness company, and other resources through Indigo Acres, such as access to their free software platform. The third one we're going to discuss is Nori. They use these Nori carbon removal tons, which is equal to 1 ton of carbon. You will be required to pay taxes on these. I'm not sure about Indigo right now. There's been talk about them trying to get you a tax credit, but I'm not sure how they're going to pull that off. Nori allows you to sell up to 5 years of carbon removal from previous years. So that's that additionality thing, but that ended in 2020. So you won't be able to get back pay if you sign up for this one unless they change that. I'm not sure if they'll continue it or not. They said they wouldn't, but we'll see. Nori uses blockchain technology that allows a secure data transfer. You can join if you've adopted those carbon sequestering practices in the last 10 years. And this is for farms 1,000 acres and up. You'll run your records through a model to estimate your carbon sequestration potential. This is that NRCS Comet Farm, which is a whole farm carbon planning tool from NRCS. And they'll provide you a projected revenue. So contract obligations, you will have to submit annual activity practice updates. You're on a 10-year contract. You sign a non-compete clause. You can't be in any other carbon markets. You are locked into the practices you sign up for and commit to. Verification by Nori, so those soil samplings can cost, in signing up, can cost anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. And then a 2-year rolling estimate of changes in soil organic matter is determined via that Comet Farm, and you will be audited after that 10 years to confirm that. Nori sells their credits for $15 per ton, and you also get this Nori token, which is a cryptocurrency that will fluctuate in cost. Both suppliers and Nori share in this risk if the computer model isn't accurate, or again, you change practices, or something happens to your farm, like it all burns. And they use these kind of like those cryptocurrency tokens held in reserve to automatically purchase new NRTs or carbon credits on behalf of the buyer and the amount of any over-reported carbon or leakage from changed practices. So I did want to just pop this map up as well. There's other programs out there besides these carbon markets. A lot of states are moving towards soil health legislation to provide grants and things like that for people that are adopting soil health practices like cover crops and changing tillage. California has one, and they're working on ones in a lot of y'all states. So, keep in touch with those. I'm sure y'all have great legislative advocacy people in y'all's area. And also I recommend everyone keeping in touch with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition. they're always got their finger on the pulse, at least with federal policy, and they may have some things for states as well. I do want to mention this program, which is the California Healthy Soils Program, because I think it's a unique combination of carbon markets and direct payments to farmers. It is legislation that was passed by the California government. It receives funding from their Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is essentially their cap and trade program. The legislature put some money towards it, and also there was a bond, Proposition 68, so voters actually put some money towards it as well. This one actually provides farmers and ranchers with direct grants. So you put an application in for some sort of sustainable ag project that you'd like to do. So you want to start planting cover crops, you want to start reducing your tillage, you want to buy some equipment, you'll submit a grant, and they'll choose whether you get accepted or not. And since 2017, they have allocated $42.8 million to farmers and ranchers through these grants. So that's pretty great. And if you're in California and you're on this, 2021 applications are coming up in February. And just I want to mention two pieces of federal legislation that everyone should kind of keep their eye on. One is the Growing Climate Solutions Act. This one is going to allow the USDA to verify and authorize carbon market verifiers and technical assistance providers to help you sequester carbon. Has really good bipartisan support. It's in the House and the Senate. I have a feeling this one's going to get passed, but we'll see. You never know. The other one is the Agriculture Resilience Act. This one focuses less on carbon markets and is really focused around improving soil health. And it would create a new soil health grant program for state and tribal governments. It would authorize the USDA to offer performance-based crop insurance discounts for practices that reduce risk, expand the National Agroforestry Center. It's going to ideally expand CSP and EQIP, and it's going to be those other ways we talked about to get y'all paid for the soil health practices y'all are doing. So lastly, I just want to kind of go over some considerations that I always recommend farmers and ranchers take a look at before applying to these programs. One is to look at the program stability. There was a failed climate program, the Chicago Climate Exchange. In the past, I think of looking how long it exists, how many people are involved, what sort of funding sources they have is a good idea. Clarity of required practices and verification processes. Know what is required of you, when are they going to test, how are they going to test, how much is it going to cost, which brings us to cost transparency. I think really going through that contract, seeing when you're going to get paid, how you're going to get paid, what's going to cost you, other grants or gap loans to help you get new equipment and things like that. Practice implementation or environmental improvement. Are they measuring something, or are they going to pay you directly for a practice? And with anything, what is going to be return on your investment? Again, I think almost plugging carbon markets into like your normal business planning and things like that is a good idea if you're interested in them, because the thing with carbon markets or some of these other programs, they're not going to pay for you to get new equipment or adopt the practice if it's a ecosystem service market. Another one is going to be length until you return. Is it going to take you 5 years to get paid? Is it going to take you 10 years? Some of this has to do with the rate that you can sequester carbon. Another one is going to be aggregation. So you saw some of these start at 1,000 acres. You may be able to get more bang for your buck if you're a smaller farmer, and you could team up with other farmers in your watershed or your neighbor, and you can aggregate a lot of these payments, almost like a co-op system. I did want to share some resources on our website. We have a payment for ecosystem service publication that goes a little bit more in depth to some of these. We also have tons of podcasts, including one with Jeannie Merrill from CalCan on that California Healthy Soils Bill and other programs they have for ecosystem services there in California. And then we have some taped webinars. One is with Debbie Reed, actually, of the Ecosystem Service Market Consortium, and Jim Blackburn out of Rice University in Texas. His work there in developing a carbon market in Texas and a national soil carbon sequestration verification standard. And lastly, there's my email. Please email me anytime. We're here to help. That's what we do. So please feel free to reach out. And thank you.